Howdy, I'm Elisa, and we're gonna read another short story from the public domain. This one is Mary Burnet. The following incidents are related as having occurred at a shepherd's house, not 100 miles from St. Mary's Loch. But, as the descendants of one of the families still reside in the vicinity, I deem it requisite to use names which cannot be recognized, save by those who have heard the story. John Allinson, the farmer's son of Inverlawn, was a handsome, roving, and incautious young man, enthusiastic, amorous, and fond of adventure, and one who could hardly be said to fear the face of either man, woman, or spirit. Among other love adventures, he fell a courting Mary Burnet of Kirkstyle, a most beautiful and innocent maiden, and one who had been bred up in rural simplicity. She loved him, but yet she was afraid of him, and though she had no objection to meeting with him among others, yet she carefully avoided meeting him alone, though often and earnestly urged to it. One day the young man, finding an opportunity at Our Lady's Chapel, after Mass, urged his suit for a private meeting so ardently, and with so many vows of love and sacred esteem, that Mary was so far won as to promise that perhaps she would come and meet him. The trysting place was a little green sequestered spot, on the very verge of the lake, well known to many as angler, and to none better than the writer of this old tale, and the hour appointed, the time when the king's Elwand, now foolishly termed the Belt of Orion, set his first golden knob above the hill. Allinson came too early, and he watched the sky with such eagerness and devotion that he thought every little star that arose in the southeast the top knob of the king's Elwand. At last the Elwand did arise in good earnest, and then the youth, with a heart palpitating with agitation, had nothing but for it to watch the heathery brow by which bonny Mary Burnet was to descend. Mind you, I checked this up, and this was written in like the 1840s. So I'm surprised I'm having surprisingly little trouble compared to other stories in this book. No Mary Burnet made her appearance, even although the King's Elwand had now measured its own equivocal length 5 or 6 times up the lift. And also, this is my first time reading this text. Meow. Young Alwonson now felt all the most poignant miseries of disappointment, and as the story goes, uttered in his heart an unhallowed wish. He wished that some witch or fairy would influence his Mary to come to him, in spite of her maidenly scruples. This wish was thrice repeated with all the energy of disappointed love. It was thrice repeated, and no more, when, behold, Mary appeared on the brae, with wild and eccentric motions, speeding to the appointed place. Allinson's excitement seemed to have been more than he was able to bear, as he instantly became delirious with joy, and also professed that he could remember nothing of their first meeting, save that Mary remained silent and spoke not a word, either good or bad. In a short time she fell a-sobbing and weeping, refusing to be comforted, and then, uttering a piercing shriek, sprung up and ran from him with amazing speed. At this part of the loch, which, as I said, is well known to many, the shore is overhung by a precipitous cliff, of no great height, but still inaccessible, either from above or below. Save in a great drought, the water comes to within a yard of the bottom of this cliff, and the intermediate space is filled with rough, unshapely pieces of rock fallen from above. Along this narrow and rude space, hardly passable by the angler at noon, did Mary bound with the swiftness of a kid, although surrounded with darkness. Her lover, pursuing with all his energy, called out, "Mary! Mary! My dear Mary! Stop and speak with me! I'll conduct you home, or maybe anywhere you please. But do not run from me. Stop, my dearest Mary! Stop!" Mary would not stop, but ran on till coming to a little cliff that jutted into the lake, round which there was no passage, and perceiving that her lover would have overtaken her, she uttered another shriek and plunged into the lake. The loud sound of her fall into the still water rung in the young man's ears like the knell of death, and if before he was crazed with love, he was now as much so with despair. He saw her floating lightly away from the shore towards the deepest part of the loch, but in a short time she began to sink and gradually disappeared, without uttering a throb or a cry. A good while previous to this, Allinson had flung off his bonnet, shoes, and coat, and plunged in. He swam to the place where Mary disappeared, but there was neither boil nor gurgle on the water, nor even a bell of departing breath to mark the place where his beloved had sunk. Being strangely impressed at that trying moment with a determination to live or die with her, he tried to dive, in hopes either to bring her up or to die in her arms, and he thought of their being so found on the shore of the lake, with a melancholy satisfaction. But by no effort of his could he reach the bottom, nor knew he what distance he was still from it. With an exhausted frame and a despairing heart, he was obliged again to seek the shore, and, dripping wet as he was, half naked, he ran to her father's house with the woeful tidings. Everything there was quiet. The old shepherd's family, of whom Mary was the youngest, and sole daughter, were all sunk in silent repose, and oh, how the distracted lover wept at the thoughts of wakening them to hear the doleful tidings. But waken them he must. So, going to the little window close to the goodman's bed, he called, in a melancholy tone, "Andrew! Andrew Burnet, are you waking?" "Troth, man, I think I be, or at least I'm half and half. What hast thou to say to old Andrew Burnet at this time of night?" "Are you waking, I say?" "Good wife, am I waking? Because if I be, tell that Stravega say, he'll maybe tak your word for it, for mine he winna talk." "Oh, Andrew, none of your humour tonight. I bring you tidings the most woeful, the most dismal, the most heart-rending, that ever were brought to an honest man's door." "To his window, you mean?" cried Andrew, bolting out of bed and proceeding to the door. "Good sophos, man, come in, wherever you be, and tell us your tidings face to face, and then we'll can better judge of the truth of them. If they be in concord with your voice, they are melancholy indeed. Have the reivers come? And are you key tonight? Are you Kai driven?" "Ah, alas, more than that, 1,000 times more than that. Your daughter, your dear beloved and only daughter, Mary." "What of Mary?" cried the goodman. "What of Mary?" cried her mother, shuddering and groaning with terror, and at the same time she kindled a light. The sight of their neighbour, half naked and dripping with wet, and madness and despair in his looks, sent a chillness to their hearts that held them in silence, and they were unable to utter a word till he went on thus. "Mary is gone, your darling and mine is lost, and sleeps this night in the watery grave, and I have been her destroyer." "Thou art mad, John Allinson," said the old man vehemently. "Raving mad, at least I hope so. Wicked as thou art, thou hadst not the heart to kill my dear child. Oh yes, you are mad. God be thankful, you are mad. I see it in your looks and demeanour. Heaven be praised, you are mad. You are mad. But You'll get better again. But what do I say? Continued he, as recollecting himself. We can soon convince our own senses. Wife, lead the way to our daughter's bed. With a heart throbbing with terror and dismay, old Jean Linton led the way to Mary's chamber, followed by the two men, who were eagerly gazing one over each of the other's shoulders. One over each of her shoulders. Mary's little apartment was in the farther end of the long, narrow cottage, and as soon as they entered it, they perceived a form lying on the bed, with the bedclothes drawn over its head. And on the lid of Mary's little chest that stood at the bedside, her clothes were lying neatly folded, as they wont to be. Hope seemed to dawn on the faces of the two old people when they beheld this, but the lover's heart sunk still deeper in despair. The father called her name, but the form on the bed returned no answer. However, they all heard distinctly sobs, as of one weeping. The old man then ventured to pull down the clothes from her face, and, strange to say, there indeed lay Mary Burnet, drowned in tears, yet apparently nowise surprised at the ghastly appearance of the three naked figures. Allinson gasped for breath, for he remained still incredulous. He touched her clothes. He lifted her robes one by one, and all of them were dry, neat, and clean, and had no appearance of having sunk in the lake. There can be no doubt that Allinson was confounded by the strange event that had befallen him, and felt like one strangeling with a frightful vision, or some energy beyond the power of man to comprehend. Nevertheless, the assurance that Mary was there in life, weeping although she was, put him once more beside himself with joy. And he kneeled at her bedside, beseeching permission but to kiss her hand. She, however, repulsed him with disdain, saying with great emphasis, "You are a bad man, John Allinson, and I entreat you to go out of my sight. The sufferings that I have undergone this night have been beyond the power of flesh and blood to endure, and by some cursed agency of yours have these sufferings been brought about. I therefore pray you, in his name, whose law you have transgressed, to depart out of my sight." Wholly overcome by conflicting passions, by circumstances so contrary to one another, and so discordant with everything either in the works of nature or providence, the young man could do nothing but stand like a rigid statue, with his hands lifted up, and his visage like that of a corpse, until led away by the two old people from their daughter's apartment. Then they lighted up a fire to dry him, and began to question him with the most intense curiosity. But they could elicit nothing from him but the most disjointed exclamations, such as, "Lord in heaven, what can be the meaning of this?" And at other times, "It is all the enchantment of the devil. The evil spirits have got dominion over me." Finding they could make nothing of him, they began to form conjectures of their own. Jean affirmed that it had been the mermaid of the loch that had come to him in Mary's shape, to allure him to his destruction. But Andrew Burnet, setting his bonnet to one side, and raising his left hand to a level with it, so that he might have full scope in motion and flourish, suiting his action to his words, thus again, with a face of sapience never to be excelled. "Good wife, it doth strike me that thou art very wide of the mark. It must have been a spirit of a great deal higher quality than a mere mermaiden, who played this extraordinary prank. The mermaiden is not a spirit, but a beastly sensitive creature with a malicious spirit within it. Now, what influence could a cold clutch of a creature like that, with a tail like a great sumont fish, however our ban, either to make her happy or unhappy, or where could it borrow her clays? Jean, tell me that. No, Jean Linton, depend on it, the spirit that caught it with poor sinful Jock there has been a fairy, but whether a good ain or an ill ain, it is hard to determine." Andrew's disquisition was interrupted by the young man falling into a fit of trembling that was fearful to look at, and threatened soon to terminate his existence. Jean ran for the family cordial, observing by the way that, though he was a wicked person, he was still a fellow creature and might live to repent. And influenced by this spark of genuine humanity, she made him swallow 2 hornspoonfuls of strong aquavitae. Andrew then put a piece of scarlet thread round each wrist, and taking a strong rowan tree staff in his hand, he conveyed his tremblings and astonished guest home, giving him a parting this sage advice. I'll tell you what it is, John Allinson. Ye have run a near risk of perdition, and, escaping that for the present, are losing your right reason. But take an old man's advice. Never gang again out by night to beguile only honest man's daughter, lest a worse thing befall thee. Next morning, Mary dressed herself more neatly than usual, but there was manifestly a deep melancholy settled on her lovely face, and at times the unbidden tear would start into her eye. She spoke no word, either good or bad, that ever her mother could recollect the whole morning, but she once or twice observed her daughter gazing at her, as with an intense and melancholy interest. About 9 o'clock in the morning, she took a hay rake over her shoulder, and went down to a meadow at the east end of the loch, to coil a part of her father's hay, her father and brother engaging to join her about noon, when they came from the sheepfold. As soon as old Andrew came home, his wife and he, as was natural, instantly began to converse on the events of the preceding night, and in the course of their conversation Andrew said, "Goodness be about us, Jean. Was not yon an awful speech o' our bairns to young Jock Allinson last night? Aye, it was a downsetter, good man, and spoken like a good Christian lass. I'm no sae sure o' that, Jean Linton, my good woman, Jean Linton, I'm no sae sure o' that. Yon speech has given me a great deal of trouble o' heart. For d'ye ken, and take my life, aye, take your life, Jean. Nay, no thus can tell whether it was in the Almighty's name or the devil's that she discharged her lover. Oh, fie, Andrew, how can you say? How can you doubt that it was in the Almighty's voice, name? Couldna she have said say then, and that would hae put it beyond a doubt, and that's what ha been the natural way too. But instead of that, she says, I pray you, in the name of him whose law you have transgressed, to depart out of my sight. I confess I'm terrified when I think about yon speech, Jean Linton. Didna she say, too, that her sufferings have been beyond what flesh and blood could have endured? What was she but flesh and blood? Didna that remark infer that she was something mair than a mortal creature? Jean Linton, what will you say if it should turn out that our daughter is drowned, and that yon was the fairy we had in the house at the night and this morning? Oh, hold your tongue, Andrew Burnet, and dinna make my heart cold within me. We hae trusted in the Lord yet, and he has never forsaken us, nor will he yet give the wicked one power over us or ours. You say very well, Jean, and we mourn and hope for the best, quoth old Andrew, and away he went, accompanied by his son Alexander, to assist their beloved Mary on the meadow. No sooner had Andrew set his head over the bent and come in view of the meadow, than he said to his son, "I wish Jock Allinson morn ha been east the loch fishing for Ged's the day, for I think my Mary has made very little progress in the meadow." "She's o'er muckle ta'en up about other things this while to mind her walk," said Alexander. "I wadna wonder, father, if that lassie gangs a black gate yet." Andrew uttered a long and a deep sigh that seemed to ruffle the very fountains of life, and, without speaking another word, walked on to the hayfield. It was 3 hours since Mary had left home, and she ought at least to have put up a dozen coils of hay each hour. But in place of that, she had put up only 7 altogether, and the last was unfinished. Her own hay rake, that had an M and a B neatly cut on the head of it, was leaning on the unfinished coil. And Mary was wanting. Her brother, thinking she had hid herself from them in sport, ran from one coil to another, calling her many bad names playfully. But after he had turned them all up, and several deep swaths beside, she was not to be found. This young man, who slept in the byre, knew nothing of the events of the foregoing night, the old man and Allinson having mutually engaged in keep them a profound secret, and he had therefore less reason than his father to be seriously alarmed. When they began to work at the hay, Andrew could work none. He looked this way and that way, but in no way could he see Mary approaching. So he put on his coat and went away home to pour his sorrows into the bosom of his wife. And in the meantime he desired his son to run to all the neighbouring farming houses and cots, every one, and make inquiries if anybody had seen Mary. When Andrew went home and informed his wife that their darling was missing, the grief and astonishment of the aged couple knew no bounds. They sat down and wept together, and declared over and over that this act of Providence was too strong for them and too high to be understood. Jean besought her husband to kneel instantly, and pray urgently to God to restore their child to them, but he declined, on account of the wrong frame of his mind, for he declared that his rage against John Allinson was so extreme as to unfit him for approaching the throne of his Maker. "But if the profligate refuses to listen to the entreaties of an injured parent," added he shall feel the weight of an injured father's arm." Andrew went straight away to Inverlawn, though without the least hope of finding young Allinson at home. But, on reaching the place, in his amazement he found the young man lying ill of a burning fever, raving incessantly of witches, spirits, and Mary Burnet. To such a height had his frenzy arrived, that when Andrew went there, it required 3 men to hold him in the bed. Both his parents testified their opinions openly, that their son was bewitched, or possessed of a demon, and the whole family was thrown into the greatest consternation. The good old shepherd, finding enough of grief there already, was obliged to confine his to his own bosom, and return disconsolate to his little family circle, in which there was a woeful blank that night. His son returned also from a fruitless search. No one had seen any traces of his sister, but an old crazy woman, at a place called Oxcleuch, said that she had seen her go by in a grand chariot with young Jock Allinson toward the Birkhill path, and by that time they were at the cross of Dumgree. The young man said he asked her what sort of chariot it was, as there was never such a thing in that country as a chariot, nor yet a road for one. But she replied that he was widely mistaken, for that a great number of chariots sometimes passed that way, though never any of them returned. Those words appearing to be merely the ravings of superannuation, they were not regarded. But when no other traces of Mary could be found, old Andrew went up to consult this crazy dame once more, but he was not able to bring any such thing to her recollection. She spoke only in parables, which to him were incomprehensible. Bonnie Mary Burnet was lost. She left her father's house at 9 o'clock on the Wednesday morning, 17th of September, neatly dressed in a white jerkin and green bonnet, with her hay rake over her shoulder, and that was the last sight she was doomed ever to see of her native cottage. She seemed to have had some presentiment of this, as appeared from her demeanour that morning before she left it. Mary Burnet of Kirkstyle was lost, and great was the sensation produced over the whole country by the mysterious event. There was a long ballad extant at one period on the melancholy catastrophe, which was supposed to have been composed by the chaplain of St. Mary's, but I have only heard tell of it without ever hearing it sung or recited. Many of the verses concluded thus: "But bonny Mary Burnet, we will never see again." The story soon got abroad, with all its horrid circumstances, and there is little doubt that it was grievously exaggerated, and there was no obloquy that was not thrown on the survivor, who certainly in some degree deserved it, for instead of growing better, he grew 10 times more wicked than he was before. In one thing the whole country agreed, that it had been the real Mary Burnet who was drowned in the loch, and that the being which was found in her bed, lying weeping and complaining of suffering, and which vanished the next day, had been a fairy, an evil spirit, or a changeling of some sort, for that it never spoke save once, and that in a mysterious manner. Nor did it partake of any food with the rest of the family. Her father and mother knew not what to say or what to think, but they wandered through this weary world like people wandering in a dream. Everything that belonged to Mary Burnet was kept by her parents as the most sacred relics, and many a tear did her aged mother shed over them. Every article of her dress brought the once comely wearer to mind. Andrew often said that to have lost the darling child of their old age in any way would have been a great trial, but to lose her in the way that they had done was really more than human frailty could endure. Many a weary day did he walk by the shores of the loch, looking eagerly for some vestige of her garments, and though he trembled at every appearance, yet did he continue to search on. He had a number of small bones collected that belonged to lambs and other minor animals, and haply some of them to fishes, from a fond supposition that they might once have formed joints of her toes or fingers. These he kept concealed in a little bag, in order, as he said, to let the doctors see them. But no relic, besides these, could he ever discover of Mary's body. Young Allinson recovered from his raging fever, scarcely in the manner of other men, for he recovered all at once. After a few days' raving and madness, Mary Burnet, it appeared, was by him no more remembered. He grew 10 times more wicked than before, and hesitated at no means of accomplishing his unhallowed purposes. The devout shepherds and cottagers around detested him, and both in their families and in the wild, when there was no ear to hear but that of heaven, they prayed protection from his devices, as if he had been the wicked one, and they all prophesied that he would make a bad end. One fine day, about the middle of October, when the days began to get very short and the nights long and dark, on a Friday morning, the next year but one after Mary Burnet was lost, a memorable day in the fairy annals, John Allinson, younger of Inverlorn, went to a great hiring fair at a village called Moffat in Annandale, in order to hire a housemaid. His character was so notorious that not one young woman in the district would serve in his father's house. So away he went to the fair at Moffat, to hire the prettiest and loveliest girl he could there find, with the intention of ruining her as soon as she came home. This is no supposition accusation. This is no supposititious This is no supposititious accusation, for he acknowledged his plan to Mr. David Welch of Carrickferran, who rode down to the market with him, and seemed to boast of it and dwell on it with delight. But the maidens of Annandale had a guardian angel in the fair that day, of which neither he nor they were aware. Alanson looked through the hiring market and through the hiring market, and at length fixed on one young woman, which indeed was not difficult to do, for there was no such form there for elegance and beauty. Mr. Welch stood still and eyed him. He took the beauty aside. She was clothed in green and as lovely as a new-blown rose. "Are you to hire, pretty maiden?" "Yes, sir." "Will you hire with me?" "I cannot, though I do. But if I hire with you, it must be for a long term." "Certainly, the longer the better. What are your wages to be?" "You know, if I hire, I must be paid in kind. I must have the first living creature that I see about Inverlawn to myself." "I wish it may be me, then. But what do you know about Inverlawn?" "I think I should know about it." "Bless me, I know the face as well as I know my own, and better, but the name has somehow escaped me. Pray, may I ask your name?" "Hush, hush," said she solemnly, and holding up her hand at the same time. "Hush, hush, you had better say nothing about that there." "I am in utter amazement," he exclaimed. "What is the meaning of this? I conjure you to tell me your name." "It is Mary Burnet," said she, in a soft whisper, and at the same time she let down a green veil over her face. If Alanson's death warrant had been announced to him at that moment, it could not have deprived him so completely of sense and motion. His visage changed into that of a corpse. His jaws fell down, and his eyes became glazed, so as apparently to throw no reflections inwardly. Mr. Welch, who had kept his eyes steadily on them all the while, perceived his comrade's dilemma, and went up to him. "Alanson, Mr. Alanson, what is the matter with you, man?" said he. "Why, the girl has bewitched you, and turned you into a statue." Alanson made some sound in his throat, as if attempting to speak, but his tongue refused its office, and he only jabbered. Mr. Welch, conceiving that he was seized with some fit, or about to faint, supported him into the Johnston arms, but he either could not or would not grant him any explanation. Welch being, however, resolved to see the maiden in green once more, persuaded Alanson, after causing him to drink a good deal, to go out into the hiring market again in search of her. They ranged the market through and through, but the maiden in green was gone, and not to be found. She had vanished in the crowd the moment she divulged her name, and even though Welch had his eye fixed on her, he could not discover which way she went. Alanson appeared to be in a kind of stupor as well as terror, but when he found that she had left the market, he began to recover himself, and to look out again for the top of the market. He soon found one more beautiful than the last. She was like a sylph, clothed in robes of pure snowy white, with green ribbons. Again he pointed this new flower out to Mr. David Welch, who declared that such a perfect model of beauty he had never in his life seen. Alanson, being resolved to have this one of at any wages, took her aside and put the usual question. "Do you wish to hire, pretty maiden?" "Yes, sir." "Will you hire with me?" "I cannot, though I do." "I care not, though I do." "What, then, are your wages to be? Come, say, and be reasonable. I am determined not to part with you for a trifle." "My wages must be in kind. I work on no other conditions. Pray, how are all the good people about Inverlawn?" Alanson's breath began to cut, and a chillness to creep through his whole frame, and he answered with a faltering tongue, "I thank you, much in the ordinary way." "And your aged neighbours?" rejoined she. "Are they still alive and well?" I think they are," said he, panting for breath, "but I am at a loss to know whom I am indebted to for these kind recollections. "What," said she, "have you so soon forgot Mary Burnet of Kirkstyle?" Alanson started as if a bullet had gone through his heart. The lovely sylph-like form glided into the crowd, and left the astounded libertine once more standing like a rigid statue, until aroused by his friend Mr. Welch. He tried a third fair one, and got the same answers, and the same name given. Indeed, the first time over I heard the tale, it bore that he tried 7, who all turned out to be Mary Burnets of Kirkstyle. But I think it unlikely that he would try so many, as he must long ere that time have been sensible that he laboured under some power of enchantment. However, when nothing else could do, he helped himself to a good proportion of strong drink. While he was thus engaged, a phenomenon of beauty and grandeur came into the fair, that caught the sole attention of all present. This was a lovely dame, riding in a gilded chariot, with 2 livery men before, and 2 behind, clothed in green and gold. And never sure was there so splendid a meteor seen in the Moffat fair. The word instantly circulated in the market that this was the Lady Elizabeth Douglas, eldest daughter to the Earl of Morton, who then sojourned at Orkins Castle in the vicinity of Moffat, and which lady at that time was celebrated as a great beauty all over Scotland. She was afterwards Lady Keith, and the mention of this name in the tale, as it were by mere accident, fixes the era of it in the reign of James IV, at the very time that fairies, brownies, and riches were at the rifest in Scotland. Every one in the market believed the lady to be the daughter of the Earl of Morton, and when she came to the Johnston Arms, a gentleman in green came out bareheaded, and received her out of the carriage. All the crowd gazed at such unparalleled beauty and grandeur, but none was half so much overcome as Alanson. He had never conceived aught half so lovely either in earth, or heaven, or fairyland, and while he stood in a burning fever of admiration, think of his astonishment, and the astonishment of the countless crowd that looked on when this brilliant and matchless beauty beckoned him towards her. He could not believe his senses, but looked this way and that way to see how others regarded the affair. But she beckoned him a second time, with such a winning courtesy and smile, that immediately he pulled off his beaver cap and hasted up to her, and without more ado she gave him her arm, and the 2 walked into the hostel. Alanson conceived that he was thus distinguished by Lady Elizabeth Douglas, the flower of the land, and so did all the people of the market, and greatly they wondered who the young farmer could be that was thus particularly favoured. For it ought to have been mentioned that he had not been one personal acquaintance in the fair, save Mr. David Welch of Carrickferran. The first thing the lady did was to inquire kindly after his health. Alanson thanked her ladyship with all the courtesy he was master of, and being by this time persuaded that she was in love with him, he became as light as if treading on the air. She next inquired after his father and mother. "Oh," thought he to himself, "poor creature, she is terribly in for it, but her love shall not be thrown away upon a backward or ungrateful object." He answered her with great politeness, and at length began to talk of her noble father and young Lord William. But she cut him short by asking if he did not recognize her. Oh yes, he knew who her ladyship was, and remembered that he had seen her comely face often before, although he could not, at that particular moment, recall to his memory the precise time or places of their meeting. She next asked for his old neighbours of Kirkstyle, and if they were still in life and health. Alanson felt as if his heart were a piece of ice. A chillness spread over his whole frame. He sank back on the seat and remained motionless. But the beautiful and adorable creature soothed him with kind words, till he again gathered courage to speak. "What?" said he. "And has it been your own lovely self who has been playing tricks on me this whole day?" "The first love is not easily extinguished, Mr. Alanson," said she. You may guess from my appearance that I have been fortunate in life, but for all that, my first love for you has continued the same, unaltered and unchanged, and you must forgive the little freedoms I used today to try your affections, and the effects my appearance would have on you. It argues something for my good taste, however, that I never pitched on any face for beauty today but your own, said he. But now that we have met once more, we shall not so easily part again. I will devote the rest of my life to you. Only let me know the place of your abode. It was hard by, said she, only a very little space from this, and happy would I be to see you there tonight, were it proper or convenient. But my lord is at present from home and in a distant country. I should not conceive that any particular hindrance to my visit, said he. With great apparent reluctance, she at length consented to admit of his visit, and offered to leave one of her gentlemen, whom she could trust, to be his conductor. But this he positively refused. It was his desire, he said, that no eye of man should see him enter or leave her happy dwelling. She said he was a self-willed man, but should have his own way. And after giving him such directions as would infallibly lead him to her mansion, she mounted her chariot and was driven away. Allinson was uplifted above every sublunary concern. Seeking out his friend David Welch, he imparted to him his extraordinary good fortune, but he did not tell him that she was not the Lady Elizabeth Douglas. Welch insisted on accompanying him on the way, and refused to turn back till he came to the very point of the road next to the lady's splendid mansion. And in spite of all that Allinson could say, Welch remained there till he saw his comrade enter the court gate, which glowed with lights as innumerable as the stars of the firmament. Allinson had promised to his father and mother to be home on the morning after the fair to breakfast. He came not either that day or the next, and the third day the old man mounted his white pony, and rode away towards Moffat in search of his son. He called at Carrickferran on his way, and made inquiries at Mr. Welch. The latter manifested some astonishment that the young man had not returned. Nevertheless, he assured his father of his safety, and desired him to return home, and then with reluctance confessed that the young man was engaged to an amour with the Earl of Morton's beautiful daughter, that he had gone to the castle by appointment, and that he, David Welch, had accompanied him to the gate and seen him enter, and it was apparent that his reception had been a kind one, since he had tarried so long. Mr. Welch, seeing the old man greatly distressed, was persuaded to accompany him on his journey, and as the last two had seen his son, and seen him into the castle, on reaching Moffat they found his steed standing at the hostel, whither it had returned on the night of the fair, before the company broke up. But the owner had not been heard of since seen in company with Lady Elizabeth Douglas. The old man set out for Auchen Castle, taking Mr. David Welch along with him. But long ere they reached the place, Mr. Welch assured him he would not find his son there, as it were nearly in a different direction that they rode in the evening of the fair. However, in the castle they went, and were admitted to the Earl, who, after hearing the old man's tale, seemed to consider him in a state of derangement. He sent for his daughter Elizabeth, and questioned her concerning her meeting with the son of the old respectable countryman, of her appointment with him on the night of the preceding Friday, and concluded by saying he hoped she had him still in safe concealment about the castle. The lady, hearing her father talk in this manner, and seeing the serious and dejected looks of the old man, knew not what to say, and asked an explanation. But Mr. Welch put a stop to it by declaring to old Allinson that the Lady Elizabeth was not the lady with whom his son made the appointment, for he had seen her, and would engage to know her again among 10,000, nor was that the castle towards which he had accompanied his son, nor anything like it. But go with me, continued he, and though I am a stranger in this district, I think I can take you to the very place. They set out again, and Mr. Welch traced the road from Moffat by which young Allinson and he had gone, until after travelling several miles they came to a place where a road struck off to the right at an angle. "Now I know we are right," said Welch, "for here we stopped, and your son entreated me to return, which I refused, and accompanied him to yon large tree, and a little way beyond it, from whence I saw him received in at the splendid gate. We shall be in sight of the mansion in 3 minutes." They passed on to the tree and a space beyond it, but then Mr. Welch lost the use of his speech, as he perceived that there was neither palace nor gate there, but a tremendous gulf, 50 fathoms deep, and a dark stream foaming and boiling below. "How is this?" said old Allinson. "There is neither mansion nor habitation of man here." Welch's tongue for a long time refused his office, and he stood like a statue, gazing on the altered and awful scene. "He only, who made the spirits of men," said he at last, "and all the spirits that sojourn in the earth and air, can tell how his was, his is. He was wandering in the world of enchantment, and have been influenced by some agencies above human nature, or without its pale. For here of a certainty did I take leave of your son, and there, in that direction, and apparently either on the verge of that gulf, or the space above it, did I see him received in at the court gate of the mansion, splendid beyond all conception. How can human comprehension make anything of this? They went forth to the verge, Mr. Welch leading the way, to the very spot on which he saw the gate opened, and there they found marks where a horse had been plunging. Its feet had been over the brink, but it seemed to have recovered itself, and deep, deep down, and far within, lay the mangled corpse of John Allinson. And in this manner, mysterious beyond all example, terminated the career of that wicked and flagitious young man. Flagitious young man. What a beautiful moral may be extracted from this fairy tale. But among all these turnings and windings there is no account given, you will say, of the fate of Mary Burnet, for this last appearance of hers at Moffat seems to have been altogether phantom or illusion. Gentle and kind reader, I can give you no account of the fate of that maiden, for though the ancient fairy tale proceeds, it seems to me to involve her fate in 10 times more mystery than what we have hitherto seen of it. The yearly return of the day on which Mary was lost was observed as a day of mourning by her aged and disconsolate parents, a day of sorrow, of fasting and humiliation. 7 years came and passed away, and the 7th returning day of fasting and prayer was at hand. On the evening previous to it, old Andrew was moving along the sands of the loch, still looking for some relic of his beloved Mary, when he was aware of a little shriveled old man who came posting towards him. The creature was not above 5 span in height, and had a face scarcely like that of a human creature. But he was, nevertheless, civil in his deportment and sensible in speech. He bade Andrew a good evening, and asked him what he was looking for. Andrew answered that he was looking for that which he should never find. "Pray, what is your name, ancient shepherd?" said the stranger, "for methinks I should know something of you, and perhaps have a commission for you, to you." "Alas, why should you ask after my name?" said Andrew. "My name is now nothing to anyone." "Had not you once a beautiful daughter named Mary?" said the stranger. "It is a hair-trending question, man," said Andrew. "But, certes, I had once a beloved daughter named Mary." "What became of her?" asked the stranger. Andrew shook his head, turned round, and began to move away. It was a theme that his heart could not brook. He sauntered along the loch sands, his dim eyes scanning every white pebble as he passed along. There was a hopelessness in his stooping form, his gait, his eye, his features, Every step that he took there was a hopeless apathy. The dwarf followed him and began to expostulate with him. Old man, I see you are pining under some real or fancied affliction, said he. But in continuing to do so, you are neither acting according to the dictates of reason nor true religion. What is man that he should fret, or the son of man that he should repine under the chastening hand of his Maker? I am far from justifying myself, returned Andrew, surveying his shriveled monitor with some degree of astonishment. But there are some feelings that neither reason nor religion can overmaster, and there are some that a parent may cherish without sin. I deny the position, said the stranger, taken either absolutely or relatively. All repining under the supreme decree is leavened with unrighteousness. But subtleties aside, I ask you, as I did before, what became of your daughter? Ask the Father of her spirit, and the Framer of her body, said Andrew solemnly. Ask him into whose hands I committed her from childhood. He alone knows what became of her, but I do not. How long is it since you lost her? It is 7 years tomorrow. Aye, you remember the time well, and you have mourned for her all that while. Yes, and I will go down to the grave mourning for my only daughter, the child of my age and of all my affection. Oh, thou unearthly-looking monitor, knowest thou aught of my darling child? For if thou dost, thou wilt know that she was not like other women. There was a simplicity and a purity about my Mary that was hardly consistent with our frail nature. Wouldst thou like to see her again? Said the dwarf. Andrew turned round, his whole frame shaking as with a palsy, and gazed on the audacious imp. See her again, creature? Cried he vehemently. Would I like to see her again, sayest thou? I said so, said the dwarf, and I say further, dost thou know this token? Look, and see if thou dost. Andrew took the token and looked at it, then at the shriveled stranger, and then at the token again, and at length he burst into tears and wept aloud, but they were tears of joy, and his weeping seemed to have some breathing of laughter intermingled in it, and still as he kissed the token, he called out in broken and convulsive sentences, Yes, old body, I do know it. I do know it. I do know it. It is indeed the same golden Edward, with 3 holes in it, with which I presented my Mary on her birthday, in her 18th year, to buy a new suit for the holidays. But when she took it, she said, I mind real what my bonny woman said. It is sae bonny and sae ken speckle, said she, that I think I'll keep it for the sake of the giver. Oh dear, dear, blessed little creature, tell me how she is, and where she is. Is she living, or is she dead? She is living, and in good health, said the dwarf, and better, and braver, and happier, and lovelier than ever. And if you make haste, you will see her and her family at Moffat tomorrow afternoon. They are in pass there on a journey, but it is an express one, and I am sent to you with that token to inform you of the circumstance, that you may have it in your power to see and embrace your beloved daughter once before you die. And am I to meet my Mary at Moffat? Come away, little dear, welcome body, thou blessed of heaven, come away, and taste of an old shepherd's best cheer, and I'll gang foot for foot with you to Moffat, and my old wife shall gang foot for foot with us too. I tell you, little blessed and welcome creel, come alone with me. I may not tarry to enter your house or taste of your cheer, good shepherd. And said the being, may plenty still be within your walls, and a thankful heart to enjoy it, but my directions are neither to taste meat nor drink in this country, but to taste back to her that sent me. Haste, go, haste, and make ready, for you have no time to lose. At what time will she be there? Cried Andrew, flinging the plaid from him to run home with the tidings. Precisely when the shadow of the Holy Cross falls due east, cried the wolf, and turning round he hasted his way. When old Jane Linton saw her husband coming hobbling and running home without his plaid, and having his doublet flying wide open, she had no doubt that he had lost his wits, and, full of anxiety, she met him at the side of the kale yard. Goodness preserve us, sir! In our right senses, Andrew Burnet. What's the matter with you, Andrew Burnet? Stand out of my gate, wife, for do you see, I am rather in a haste, Jane Linton. I see that indeed, good man, but stand still and tell me what has putten in you sick a haste, ye demented. Na, good wife, Jane Linton, I'm no demented, I'm only gone away till Moffat. Oh, goodness pity the poor old body. How can ye gang to Moffat, man? Or what are ye to do at Moffat? Dinna ye mind that the morn is that day o' our solemnity? Hold out of my way, good old wife, and dinna speak of solemnities to me. I'll keep it at Moffat the morn. Aye, good wife, and you shall keep it at Moffat too. What do you think of that, woman? To woo ye dinna ken the metal that's in an old body till it be tired. Andrew Burnet, get away with your frightened looks, woman, and haste you gang and fling me out at Sabbath day clays. And Jane Linton, my woman, do you hear? Gang and pit on your bridal gown, and your silk hood, for ye maun be at Moffat the morn too, and it is mere not time, nor time we were aware. Dinna look sae surprised, woman, till I tell ye that our ain Mary is to meet us at Moffat the morn. Oh, Andrew, dinna sport wi' the feelings of an old forsaken heart. Good forbid, my old wife, that I should never sport with feelings of yours, cried Andrew, bursting into tears. They are as sacred to me as breathings frae the thrones of grace, but it is true that I tell ye, our dear bairn is to meet us at Moffat the morn, we a son in every hand, and we maun even gang and see her aince again, and kiss her and bless her afore we do. The tears now rushed from the old woman's eyes like fountains, and dropped from her sorrow-worn cheeks to the earth. And then, as with a spontaneous movement, she threw her skirt over her head, kneeled down at her husband's feet, and poured out her soul in thanksgivings to her Maker. She then rose up, quite deprived of her senses through joy, and ran crouching away on the road towards Moffat, as if hasting beyond her power to be at it. But Andrew brought her back. and they prepared themselves for their journey. Kirkstyle being 20 miles from Moffat, they set out on the afternoon of Tuesday, and the 16th of September, slept that night at a place called Turnberry Shale, and were in Moffat next day by noon. Wearisome was the remainder of the day to that aged couple. They wandered about conjecturing by what road their daughter would come, and how she would come attended. "I have made up my mind on both these matters," said Andrew. "At least I thought it was likely that she would come out of the east, because our blessings are frae that end. But finding now that would be o'er near to the very road we had come ourselves, I now tell it for granted she'll come frae the south. And I just think I see her leading a bonny boy in every hand, and a servant lass carrying a little bundle ahint her." The two now walked out on all the southern roads in hopes to meet their Mary, but always returned to watch the shadow of the Holy Cross, and by the time it fell due east, they could do nothing but stand in the middle of the street and look round them in all directions. At length, about half a mile out on the Dumfries road, they perceived a poor beggar woman approaching with two children following close to her, and another beggar a good way behind. Their eyes were instantly riveted on these objects, for Andrew thought he perceived his friend the dwarf in the one that was behind, and now all other earthly objects were to them nothing, save these approaching beggars. At that moment a gilded chariot entered the village from the south, and drove by them at full speed, having two livery men before and two behind, clothed in green and gold. "Ach, wow! The vanity of worldly grandeur!" ejaculated Andrew, as the splendid vehicle went thundering by, but neither he nor his wife deigned to look at it farther, their whole attention being fixed on the group of beggars. "Aye, it is just my woman," said Andrew. "It is just her sell. I ken her gang yet. Sair pressed down wi' porth, although she be. But I dinna care how poor she be, for baith her and hers shall be welcome to my fireside as lang as I hae ane." While her eyes were thus strained and her hearts melting, their eyes were thus strained and their hearts melting with tenderness and pity, Andrew felt something embracing his knees, and on looking down, there was his Mary, blooming in splendour and beauty, kneeling at his feet. Andrew uttered a loud hysterical scream of joy, and clasped her in his bosom, and old Jean Linton stood trembling, with her arms spread, but durst not close them on so splendid a creature, till her daughter first enfolded her in a fond embrace, and then she hung upon her and wept. It was a wonderful event, a restoration without a parallel. They indeed beheld their Mary, their long-lost darling. They held her in their embraces, believed in their identity, and were satisfied. Satisfied, did I say? They were happy beyond the lot of mortals. She had just alighted from her chariot, and perceived her aged parents standing together. She ran and kneeled at their feet. They now retired into the hostel, where Mary presented her two sons to her father and mother. They spent the evening in every social endearment, and Mary loaded the good old couple with rich presents, watched over them till midnight, when they both fell into a deep and happy sleep. And then she remounted her chariot, and was driven away. If she was any more seen in Scotland, I never heard of it, but her parents rejoiced in the thoughts of her happiness till the day of their death. Mary Burnet, everyone. I'm Elisa. Hope you enjoyed.